let's start with the tail end of 2022. So this is when you released your debut album, The Worst Generation. Where were you in your artistry at that point in your career?
Um, Tail end of 2020. Where was I? I was trying to evaluate my environment. When I dropped the album, obviously I'd taken everything I could from what I'd learned and who I thought I was in that space and how to like, because sometimes I write from a place of wanting to like help other people see themselves. More time I write from that place, to be fair. Like if I'm saying it, I know I'm not the only one feeling it, but it might just be a difficult thing to say, or you might not have the right friendship group or the right environment to be able to express that side of things. So come listen to this, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think I was content with what I'd decided to put out and what I decided to give, and that the Worst Generation as an album is the shape of a young black man from South London who's making music, but also faces all of the same like stereotypes and social issues and all of these things, but looking at my environment and then how I now, not being like from the road or anything like that, kind of just how I fit in that as just like a normal civilian guy, do you know what I mean? And how I still face those things, do you know what I mean? So it's like people were talking about and have been talking about for years, like who's to blame for knife crime or who's to blame for whatever. And the Worst Generation was my way of saying like, who is to blame? Like it's a question mark. There's like a silent question mark at the end of like, because the previous generation or the older generation always blamed the younger one, and then the younger one always blamed the older one, and then everyone in between is writing about it. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's like you read and you absorb a lot of things, and I felt like the Worst Generation was my way of saying this is what I see and this is what I experience, and this is what I love and this is what I hate, and this is what I go through, and this is what I'm indifferent about, and this is what I feel like is just a part of my navigation. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. That's kind of where I was at that time.
When you were in the kind of throes of like recording this new album and sowing the seeds, did you feel an expectation that comes with that dreaded sophomore slump, that second album? Did that, or did you overcome it?
When I started the following album, nah, I was very adamant about not wanting to write stuff just for the sake of writing stuff. Like, oh, I need another album. That's not how I think about music, because the music is so intrinsic to my life. Like, if I haven't seen my brother in a week and I know that he's not going to be about for another month for whatever reason, like, or we've discussed, yo, I'm not going to be about for a little while. I got to go here and do this because I need to survive, or whatever the case may be. I'll go and make me free. Do you know what I mean? If I didn't want to leave my house, I'll make Jaded. If I didn't want to, if I wanted to talk about the plight of black women, but from a perspective of like me wanting to give you something to get ready to and feel pretty to, I'll make Black Girl Magic. If I feel like, man, I put in too much emphasis, or my environment is putting too much emphasis right now, or I'm being moved emotionally too much by that emphasis on material things, I make consumer rhythm or metal and rocks. Like, it's very literal and intrinsic to the way that I live. Do you know what I mean? Because I know that music is inspired by life and art is inspired by life, so I don't ever want to disconnect those things for the sake of selling a product.
How long did it take you to record your new album Coming Up for Air?
I'm not really sure, you know. I'm not really sure, because some songs I've I wrote ages ago, but it wasn't necessarily for the album. Do you get what I mean? So it was like I just needed to write. Like I was saying, it's because it's so intrinsic to my life. I just needed to write that at that time, and then I realized, okay, I'm not in a good place. Do you know what I mean? Because the things that are coming out of me instinctively and naturally and are good for the art and are good because sometimes I'll write a really morbid lyric and I'll think, or for this album, I've written some lyrics over some completely juxtaposed type of music. So I might write a really dark lyric over a really comforting riff, or I might write like a really aggressive lyric over a really serene riff. Do you know what I mean? Or like a serene sound, like an innocent sound, like a flute or something. And
that was going to be one of my questions later, but I think we should touch on it now.
Yeah.
I feel this album balances like the grittier, hard-hitting themes with like a lightness of touch.
Yeah.
It's not like all downcast.
Yeah.
You strike that balance like beautifully on this album.
Thank you.
Were you intentional about, okay, I need to have light, dark, because that is life.
Yeah.
There is always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there's always a grey area as well, though. Do you know what I mean? And I think what I tried to do with this album was musically evolve it from the previous one. I was like, I want it to sound more lush, and I want it to have a more expensive feel. Do you get me? Because that feel, before I even say anything, is comforting enough. You get me? You know, like when you find a song like I feel like old Pharrell, like NERD Pharrell's stuff had it. It was like just really, the beats and the music just hugged you. Do you know what I mean? Before he even put a lyric down or said anything. And yeah, I just wanted to try and make better musical choices. So I surrounded myself. It's all about who you surround yourself with. I surrounded myself with some brilliant musicians, and I was like, these are my ideas. And they were like, okay, this is how we interpret your ideas. And sometimes I was like, no, I just need this. And other times I was like, no, that's better than what my idea was. Do you get me? But it was always to try and create a musically superior sonic environment before I even lay a lyric. But obviously because the songs I didn't go to a camp and say, this is what I want to do. It was like, I wrote this song and that informed the next song, and that informed the sound or the entry point of the next song. And then when you have all the songs, you're like, okay, how do I weave the message sentimentally into these things? You get me? Into these songs to kind of create more context. And then what mediums do I use to do that? Is it phone calls? Is it me talking to myself? Is it like do I open more space and put loads of reverb in the back and make it really like feel really existential and holistic and spiritual? Or do I make it really close? Do you know what I mean? And make it super intimate like this. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I want it to feel like a conversation at all times. And I like intimacy in music. I like intimacy in life, but I like intimacy in music. I feel like serenity and sincerity is a big part of what makes this album what it is, as well as addressing the things that I was feeling at the time in the way they needed to be felt, like on low key. I'm just going at it, like this is what I felt, this is why I felt it, and this is what happened. Do you know what I mean?